Take two. Welcome, everybody, to the Science and Politics Society live stream talk series. I'm your disembodied voice. My name's Will. I'm the president, and I'm going to be welcoming our special guests that you see on the screen today. So our very special guests, they're friends of the club, Benjamin and Daniel Scalera. Daniel has a master's degree in chemical engineering from NJIT, and Benjamin has a master's degree in computer science from Montclair State University. True to the club, they are STEM students who have interest and knowledge about geopolitics. They will be talking about America's role in the world from a geopolitical standpoint. The Scalera Brothers say that Peter Zion's books have answered many questions that you might have about America and how they stand in the world. So, personally, I'm very excited to hear about it, and let's welcome them and let's get started. All right. So, applause, and whenever you get ready, guys.
Thank you. I was really interested when I found out the talks on YouTube from Peter Zion. He really explained a lot of questions that I always had about the way the world works and why America needs to give so much money to other countries, and why does America need to be the world police? Why are we defending so many other?
Why do we have trade deals that don't benefit us? Like we keep hearing Trump say, that's the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals. Well, there's a reason for that. There are many reasons for all these things, and Peter Zion gives very good reasons, and so we should start. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the world police. Why are we? We've heard since for a long time. Why are we the world's police? People complaining about it, and it's because after World War II, we had the problem of the Soviet Union, and there was still an ever-present threat that needed some way we needed to solve it. They were on the other side of the world, and they had this giant army. Like even Germany, they couldn't do anything about the Soviets because there were just so many of them. The term that's used about Russia is calling it the horde lands, because there's just so many people there. The army is just so vast. And so we need to have some other strategy to take care of Russia. And so Peter Zion traces that all the way back to Bretton Woods Agreement right before the end of World War II.
Peter Zion said before Bretton Woods, the countries traded ammo in wars instead of trading. There wasn't a lot of economic trade because there was a lot more wars between countries. They didn't think about the next
empires.
Yeah, trade was only between empires, because only empires had the power to control the resources and secure their ships in the trade. So there was the British Empire and other. There was the Japanese Empire.
Because they had navies, they were able to control the sea lanes. Something that we take for so much granted these days is that America controls the sea lanes and protects all trade around the world. Now we can have super tankers of oil with so many barrels on every single one of them. They're like gold mines floating on the open sea, and anyone that wants them could take them, if not for America patrolling the sea lanes with our navy.
If America wasn't there to patrol the sea lanes, then any of those shipping, the shipments could be easily attacked and pirated by nearby countries.
So part of Bretton Woods and this agreement ever since World War II is that we would protect the sea lanes and trade for anyone that would be on our side against the Soviet Union. We just had to get them to agree to be bodies between us and the Soviets, that they would take our side on all things against Soviets, that we would administer all military strategy for them. And so we had first, before the war ended, we had our allies in Bretton Woods. Then, after the war ended, we had some of the defeated powers ended up in Bretton Woods too, and it kept increasing until we even had China in it with Nixon. We had China agreed to be on our side against the Soviets, and the umbrella just kept increasing until the Soviet Union collapsed, and even Russia itself could be protected by us. And then something strange happened when World War II ended, when the Cold War ended. Everything just continued as it was. All the strategy went on like autopilot, and now it's been about 3 decades now. We have no new strategy. There's no new single goal for the whole world. We had the whole world on our side. We ensured that the whole world would have their military taken care of by us, and they just had to pay. They just had to be bribed by us to be on our side. Now everyone is still taking advantage of us, but there's no strategic reason for us to continue our end of the bargain.
Right. Here, I think I have a little bit more details here. There's a reason America has been so involved in other parts of the world. The reason is the Bretton Woods Agreement. After World War II, America created the Bretton Woods Agreement to protect trade between all countries that are part of the agreement. The only thing that the countries needed to do to be part of the agreement was to be an ally against Russia. America often lost a lot of money from the trade deals made with countries in the Bretton Woods system. The trade deals were not meant to be good for us. The trade deals were meant to be good for our policy.
They were bribes. They were not trade deals.
They were bribes to get the other countries on our side against Russia. They were not about trade, they were about bribes. America gained a lot of allies through the Bretton Woods system. After a few years, any country that had agreed to the Bretton Woods system had increased their prosperity, and so more and more countries joined the agreement because they all got security for their trade from America. They didn't have to protect their shipments. America protected all shipments across the world. Since Russia was not part of the agreement, Russia could not compete, and they slowly weakened. Then in 1991, the Soviet Union of Russia collapsed. After the Soviet Union collapsed, the Bretton Woods system was no longer needed, or at least it wasn't needed in its current form. At the time, the president was George H.W. Bush. And he tried to have a discussion about how to update the Bretton Woods Agreement so that we could have a trade system that more closely meets the way things work in the world after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
He tried to discuss what would be the new singular goal for the world after the Soviet Union collapsed. But he was voted out of office, and then we had Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, he was only focused on domestic politics. He only really cared about being a good domestic president. Then we had Bush's son, and he only cared about the Middle East. And that was 8 years, only caring about the Middle East, with us getting more disillusioned by this Bretton Woods system by the day. The Soviet Union collapsed, and then when we wanted something out of it, we wanted our allies to help us with what we wanted in the Middle East. So few of them came to our aid when we requested it. And it was like, why are we even not holding our end then? And then we had Obama. Obama just, he didn't really want to do much of anything. People would, world leaders would call his office, and then he just wouldn't answer the phone. And now we have Trump, who world leaders will call, and he will openly insult them. So Trump, he's just the ultimate end of trend that's been happening since the end of the Cold War. He's not something particularly, he's not a difference in kind, he's a difference of degree. Like we went from Obama not caring to Trump just openly admitting what everyone's seen for the last 3 decades.
So as you just said, a difference in degree. Peter Zeihan actually says the next president after Trump will probably be even more
isolationist.
Yeah, isolationist than Trump. As we said, we don't really need to worry about Russia anymore. So
Get to the map.
yeah, right. So America doesn't need to have a global system the same way anymore. So we're just becoming more and more isolationist.
Get to the picture.
Which picture?
Yes.
Okay.
You're
Turn it sideways.
Is this the one? Is this one?
Is it?
No, that's not the one. That's not the one I told you to save. We would have to go to. Anyway. We had a map that we were going to show, but that's not there. So
which one?
The one about national. Anyway, so compared to the rest of the world, America does not trade much at all. Trade only makes up about 20% or so of our international trade. Only makes up about 20% or so of our GDP. Other countries makes up a whole lot more. We're one of the least trade-dependent nations, really. And then of that trade that we have, a lot of it is between us and our continent, being Mexico and Canada.
One of the reasons America doesn't need to worry about international trade is just because we have so many different kinds of states in America. We can grow just about anything we need. We can make just about everything we need here in the States. And most of the trade that happens is between the states in the United States.
And now with the shale revolution, we don't even care about the Middle East. We never even really cared about the Middle East for ourselves. Within the Bretton Woods Agreement, we cared about the Middle East because we were ensuring that the rest of the world could get oil for themselves. If we were in the Middle East and meddling in the Middle East for so long, because we need to make sure everything, all the oil flowed. People make fun of, oh, there's oil, and so America's going to send their military there. We did that for Europe. We would go and do that for Japan. We would do that for India. We did that so that all these countries were free to develop. These countries that could never be stable and develop could now develop like they could never have done before.
That's another big question I always wondered about. Why are we going to war for oil in the Middle East when we have so much oil here? Actually, we really didn't need to. And especially now we don't need to, because America is now a net exporter of oil. We have, with the new techniques for drilling for shale oil, we actually produce more oil than we need, and we don't need to trade to get oil internationally.
And the kind of oil that we have is of a higher grade too, because it's so far underneath impermeable rock. The shale oil is some of the purest and sweetest crude that there is available.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Next. Oh, and Germany, yeah. We were over in the Middle East so that there could be oil and energy for places to develop, like Germany included. And then when we were in Germany, a couple of weeks or even months ago now, there was some headline that there was about 20,000 or so troops being removed from Germany. We were there. We were in Germany for this long. It's not even really because of Russia anymore. We were there so that Germany would never need to have its own military again. Because when Germany has a military, it causes problems for the rest of Europe. Germany, ever since it became a state in the 1800s with Prussia, it caused the rise and fall of Europe. Between wars in the 1800s and then the two world wars.
Right. So America was not interested in a discussion about updating the Bretton Woods system. So George H.W. Bush was voted out of office. The outdated system stayed in effect, and it continues today to affect American policy decisions.
Yeah.
Each.
Maybe you say that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead. Just continue with the script. Go ahead.
Right. Each president had less and less interest in the Bretton Woods system, and by now that agreement makes sense for even makes even less sense. Americans are slowly becoming less interested in staying involved in other countries, and they support a lot of Americans support Trump's isolationist policies. Global demography, fertility, and the average age of the people in the world has changed a lot, which greatly affects their ability to produce and consume traded goods. This is one of the main reasons why the Bretton Woods system makes less sense for America now.
Okay, so another thing about the Bretton Woods system is that it allowed countries to just keep exporting, and like we were the consumer sink for decades, because part of the agreement was that our markets would be open for anyone to export to. Like that's part of an empire, that you have market rights, that you can trade, you can force. When we were in the British Empire, they were forcing their tea on us, and they were forcing us to buy it at their rates and various other products, and that's what we didn't like, because since we were part of their empire, we were forced to stay in their market. Now, since World War II with Bretton Woods, everyone was the whole world was part of a single market, and so countries could just be exporters. They could just export to the consumer sinks of America, of China, and there could be consumer-driven growth, there could be export-driven growth, and it could balance out, and all places could win out on that. And that worked out as long as there could be consumer sinks and they need for a place to have consumption-led growth. They need a young demography, because just think of all the things that the young people need. They need diapers, they need food, they need school, they need college, all kinds of vehicles to travel, and all those things. Just things that you don't need when you're about to retire, when you're in the prime of your life working. And so consumption-led growth goes along with a young demography. For decades, that was fine. And now, in various places all around the world, that's not working out so well. Germany, in particular, we're back to Germany now, they've been industrialized for, since before the 1900s, they were industrialized, and so they have some of the worst demography in the world. They can have not and could not be a consumption-driven economy. They have been export value-added economy for a while, because they have veteran workers that are seasoned, and they add value. They do high value production.
One of the reasons China depends on our American security trade for their trade is because they need to trade the things that they make with the rest of the world. They don't have enough young people in China
since the one-child policy.
Right, since the one-child policy, they don't have enough young people consuming the goods that they produce.
Ever since the one-child policy, China could not have consumption-driven growth. So then, 20 years after the...
it's 30 years.
20 years after the one-child policy, you run out of 20-year-olds. Right. 30 years, you run out of 30-year-olds, and so on and so forth. And so, ever since I guess 20 years after the one-child policy, they could not have consumption-led growth. Since then, they've been trying to do export-driven growth. And that's not working out so well, because there are not many places left that can be a consumption sink. And Europe is definitely not a consumption sink.
And
that's why get to the population pyramids.
Mm-hmm. And that's why China's been trying to do a currency manipulation. Here, this is the population chart for.
That's good.
This is the population chart for China. You can see that
it's very top heavy, meaning that there's a lot more older people now.
and the younger people are on the bottom. And it doesn't. There's not as many, so there's not as many consumers for their products.
Go to some of the European countries now.
Mm-hmm.
Canada even.
Yeah. Here's
Canada is in a similar situation. They are also a value-added economy now. They have a smaller area on the bottom, fewer young people.
It's
no
not
consumption.
Right. It's not as bad as China, but they still have more on the upper part of their graph.
Comparing to us now. Oh, in Mexico.
Here's Mexico.
Mexico is a very healthy one that can actually be a consumption sink. Mexico is very useful to us now because we can make products and they can be a sink for the products. They can have their consumption driven growth while we have our export driven growth by exporting to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mexico, can you see it yet? This one is Mexico. It's got the Mexican flag on it, so to show that it's Mexico.
Yeah.
So one side,
the x-axis has the years they were born.
This side has female, and the other side has male. And it's got numbers for the amount, and it's got years when they were born going up and down the axis.
Mm-hmm.
So the top of the graph are the oldest people. The bottom are the youngest people. Like we were saying, from Mexico, it's very healthy, consumption driven, because it's very wide on the bottom.
And the axis on the bottom shows the number in thousands of people in that country.
Okay, let's see. Find the European one.
There's no European.
Go ahead, talk about something.
Oh, dear. Right. So there's export-driven economies, and there's other countries that import most of their things.
It's not connected to the internet.
Right. So.
Okay.
Wow.
What are we talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Try not to repeat the stuff that we already said.
right, I know. Okay, because of what we just showed you, there's huge differences in demography. The population of the countries has not enough young people to support the older people. Some people call it a demographic winter, where sometimes one younger person is supporting two parents, and maybe even four grandparents, and that system is not sustainable, where you can't have one person making enough money for a whole family. For a population to decrease, it's not always such a bad thing, but for a population to decrease so quickly as it is in so many countries in the world right now, that's going to cause a lot of disasters.
Yeah. We need to get to here.
Right. So, right. So there are economic disasters coming for many countries, which will only be made worse if America withdraws from the global trade system.
Huh? This is for all of Europe.
Oh, great.
Okay. Now, getting to what we were saying, here is a population for all of Europe. This is from populationpyramid.net. This graph is for all of Europe, and Europe as a whole, it's pretty elderly, with most of the people older than 25, and more of it going even higher. So that's just Europe as a whole, and it gets worse if you talk about specific countries like Germany. Let's go to Germany now.
Mm-hmm.
Germany has an even more noticeable bulge on the top. It has a bulge on the top, which is actually very close to retirement age.
I believe
Over in Germany, the bulge is around 50 to 60 years old. They're in the next decade or so, that bulge for Germany is going to be retired. They will have mass retirements. They will lose their workforce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the graph for Japan actually has more people over 60 than there are under 60.
Let's go to Japan.
So that
Japan has had an elderly population for a long time now, but they have means of resolving that. Like something interesting that I would add from an outside source is that there was a Japanese YouTuber that I watch sometimes. He was questioning. Someone questioned, "What are you going to do about your workforce? Are you going to? Do you think that you should have more immigrants?" And he said, "What do we need immigrants for? We could just use robots." So Japan, they've had to deal with the demography issue for a couple of decades now, but they just automate. Mm-hmm. And something interesting that is that they do is they don't outsource. They don't take things back to their own country. They desource, as Zion calls it, which is for Japan. They just send their factories into other countries. Mm-hmm. Like we'll have Toyota plants here in America where the cars will be sold. They will make the stuff in the same place that it's sold, and then the profits just get sent back to Japan. It helps them with relations with the country that they are native made, they're staffed by natives, and then gives us a vested interest in making their care, a vested interest in Japan. Mm-hmm. Okay, any other population pyramids for now? Anyway, so I guess that's enough for the population pyramids right now then.
Right. Okay, so such a huge decrease in population is going to cause a lot of disasters. There's probably going to be some wars and famines between countries, which is going to cause a lot of conflicts. And since America is becoming more isolationist, we're not going to be there to help when these countries have their conflicts. So there's multiple disasters here where America is withdrawing, plus the population of these countries, it means that they need us right now more than ever. Right. So as America becomes more isolationist, those problems from the demographic problems are only going to be made worse as America withdraws. America became involved in the Middle East so the rest of the world could prosper. America did not need oil in the Middle East as much as most people think we did.
It's repeating again.
Right.
So don't. Here, while you do that, here, and go ahead. You can read your script. Go ahead. Go look at the script. Look at your script. Okay, so while he's doing that, here is a map of world trade as a percentage of GDP, international trade as a percentage of GDP, with the lighter colors meaning it's a lower percentage of GDP. America is one of the lowest percentage of GDP that trade accounts for. And as can be shown over here, there's lighter colors over there. And like all of Europe is very dark because Europe it's very trade dependent. And so is a lot of Africa. Africa is very trade dependent. And then even China, it's just slightly more than us, but it's enough. It's enough to make a difference for them.
Mm-hmm. So how did America get in this position where we were able to have such huge influence on the world in the first place? The biggest influencer of a country's prosperity is its geography. Um, in Europe, the most prosperous country has been Germany for most of its history. Well,
Oh, no, don't say that. The driver of geopolitical growth are navigable riverways. And the problem in Europe, why there are so many nations and they are so divided, is that very few of the rivers are actually interconnected. Over here in the United States, we have this gigantic river system of the Mississippi rivers. There's the Mississippi River, and then there's so many other tributaries that span, like the Mississippi River and all its tributaries are like one of the biggest, the largest navigable river system in the whole world. And so we have these flatlands and these great farmlands that are so close to these engines of growth, these giant navigable rivers, and then even along the eastern coast over here, there's a lot of islands just a little bit further than the coast. So this like just along New Jersey even, there's beaches, and between the beaches and the coast, there's it's sort of like a river because it's not the open sea. We go over to Seaside Heights. When we go to Seaside Heights, you have to cross another bridge to get to the island because it's not exactly connected. And so it's like over here along most of the eastern coast, we even have almost like another river system going from around Maine all the way to Florida or something. So some big system like that too. So then, like I said before, the problem in Europe is that these great engines of growth are not connected. So you have many, many different cultures because these are cultures that grew up in the different rivers.
America's rivers are more connected than Europe's rivers, and rivers have always been the most cost-effective way to transport anything. And even now that we have cars and trains, by boat is still the most cost-effective way to transport anything across the world.
Over in Europe, the thing about Germany is that Germany has river systems that connect to all around. Their river systems that connect to the North Sea, that connect to the Black Sea, and that connect to the Mediterranean. But then another thing about Germany is that the middle is where the highlands are. So then for a lot of German history, the outer part has been preyed upon by other countries, other states. So it wasn't until really the Industrial Revolution when we had actual things like trains that they could connect different German city-states.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, France has somewhat more connected river systems. The river systems at their heads are closer to each other, and so they're more interconnected along the valleys. And France has been somewhat better on that.
Right. So Germany was forced to innovate with the train system earlier than most other countries in the world because they needed it as their transport.
To unify the country. They needed trains to unify the country so that they could just exist even, so that they wouldn't be preyed upon by outside powers all the time.
Germany does not have natural borders. So
on the exterior.
Right, on the exterior of their country. So that's why they're going to war with other countries around them so often, because they're always afraid that another country is going to take over their land. And the reason that there's been so few wars in the last 75 years or so is because everyone was in the Bretton Woods system with America, and countries didn't go to war with each other. Instead, they just competed economically with trade. But if America does pull out and become more isolationist, there's a good chance that Germany could end up starting another war soon.
Particularly with Russia. Wait, that's another one. Yes, and as we bring up Russia, we should go to the Russian map. How does this one work? Okay, another tab. As we bring up Russia, we should go to Russia. Wait, where's the tab? Wait, oh, that's where it works. There it is. As we bring up Russia, we should look at its population pyramid to see why Russia is relevant here. Russian Federation. And here, on the other side, yeah. And so this is the population pyramid for Russia. It's very skewed with peaks at various places, like especially after the Cold War, there was a baby bust. There's no reason to be happy after you just lost such a long conflict as the Cold War. They weren't going to have children.
One
of
the reasons
in the next few years, Russia is going to run out of an actual military age population. As they run out of military age population, they will become more desperate to defend their borders. And this is where the conflict that my brother mentioned between Germany and Russia will come up. Russia will become more desperate to get better borders, and Germany needs to do something because they can't continue with export-driven growth. Export-driven growth means that you need somewhere that will consume it. And as we showed about the population pyramid for all of Europe, Europe cannot be that consumption sink. All of Europe is aging quickly.
And that's one of the reasons that China may not exist as a unified country within possibly even the next 10 years.
We were talking about Europe.
But I'm just saying China has the same problem because there's no sink for all of their exports around the world. But yeah, as he said, with the after World War II, Russia didn't have a baby boom the way America did. Americans were very happy after winning the war. We felt secure, and in our country, that's why we had a baby boom that other countries didn't have.
Where are we on the notes now?
Okay, so let's think about what would happen as America becomes more isolationist. Many people didn't think about the next day what would happen after our system against the Soviet Union, because they thought it would all end with the end of the world. They thought there would end up being a nuclear war. So they didn't think about what if we actually won against Russia.
Where are we?
Here.
No, we did that. We did. Anyway, so as consumption-led growth becomes impossible around the world, and we're going to become more isolationist, like he keeps saying, we don't really have many trade agreements that we really care about. We already made the new NAFTA, the USMCA, so that's Mexico and Canada taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
But a thing about, while we talk, before we go on, thing about that is, like we were explaining with Mexico's population pyramid, they're a consumption sink, and they're a perfect partner for us, so that we can make value-added products and bring them and send them off to Mexico, while Mexico will make the lower value items, and they will consume our higher value items. Canada, on the other hand, they're not really a partner. They're more of a competitor because they have a demography that's very similar to our own. It's even older though. And so Canada they're aging very fast, and they're export-driven growth. And so then when we were getting to the negotiations for the USMCA, there was not much on that Canada could even offer. For decades during the Cold War, Canada got off easy because any missile that was sent from the Soviet Union to attack us, it would be flying over Canada first. And so they got off easy because they were just part of the whole deal. They were part of the whole deal of, wait, if we get hit, it will be going over their land first, and we need them on our side. And so we just let them get away with all kinds of stuff. And then when the USMCA came around, it's like, no, we're not doing any more of that.
Mhm.
And so now we have the whole continent of North America. And then some other trade agreements we care about are Japan and England. Those two are countries that are right off the coast of a major continent, Asia and Europe. They're islands, they're island nations, so they're almost like a permanent aircraft carrier that we care about just for that strategic usefulness. We care about them so much for that, and we have trade. We already have the trade deal with Japan. The trade deal with England is in the works, and then besides that, South Korea, they bought into the plan, and so they still can export to us. Besides that, we're probably not going to make any other trade deals.
Right.
We don't really care about the European
The thing is, Trump has recognized that a lot of the trade deals that have been in effect for many years are no longer needed because the
Cold War ended.
Right, because the Cold War ended and we need a new updated system. And Trump has been renegotiating a lot of trade deals for the way things are now. He negotiated trade deals with England, Japan, Korea, South Korea, Canada, and Mexico.
And probably no one else.
Right.
What else is in the notes?
Can I just go from here? Right. Okay, so as long as the demographic, the largest part of the demographics of the country is below 40, it's all about spending. There's plenty of spending to continue growth. So as the average age of the population is above 40, consumption-led and investment-led growth will become impossible because there's not enough people working to create that growth. There'll be more people retired.
And another thing about the demography is that right before a large portion of the population retires, then you have lots of people that have been experienced, have made a lot of money throughout their life, and they've got the most amount of money to invest. So right before retirement, a country can have lots of investment-led growth, and there's money to go all around. You can have these great projects like growing agriculture in Brazil, where there's some really bad infrastructure, there's some really bad soil. They just need to pump. There's places all around the world that they just need to pump it full of fertilizer and all kinds of chemicals that no one would have ever thought of growing agriculture in until there was this glut of investment-led growth that throughout the whole world. And that will soon end as we get to the other side of the retirement. Mm-hmm. As we're on the other end of retirement, then people are no longer investing. They're taking the money out of their investments. All the glut of money will be gone. We can no longer have investment-led growth throughout the entire world, pretty much.
You're right. So a lot of places were only able to become prosperous because there was so much investment by the people who were working in America and other parts of the developed world who had the money to invest. And as that money available for investments dries up, those countries that require so much to be profitable will no longer be able to survive. And there's going to be a lot their population is going to shrink. So yeah, consumption-led growth around the world is about to become impossible. Other than the USA, only about 2 countries have a sustainable demography. That's France and Australia. And that does not make a global order, 2 countries. And this is all going to end anyway, because consumption growth cannot continue forever. You can't continue growing and growing within finite resources on the planet.
Population pyramid for France. It's relatively healthy, and they don't exactly have consumption-led growth, but they can absorb what they make. They have growth where they can make stuff and they can consume their own products.
All right. So Canada actually had, with the old NAFTA agreements, Canada actually made exemptions for specific companies in their industries, and with the new trade deals, Trump did not allow any of that, and so their prime minister, the deputy prime minister, Christina Freeland, was actually really surprised that those were removed from the new NAFTA agreement. So here, Canada sent Trudeau to go into talks with Trump because Peter Zion said Trudeau was unburdened by having anything going on between his ears.
You don't need to say that. Next point.
Oh, when the Japanese leader Shinzo Abe wanted to make a trade deal with Trump, he brought golden golf clubs in return for intelligence sharing and military cooperation.
Something new. Anything new?
As England becomes more desperate for trade, they're probably going to allow their financial district to be moved to the United States. And
part of why London was such a central part of the financial world was because it had both the pound and the euro. The euro is no longer relevant to London, and so it's not even that relevant as it will lose some relevance as a financial district.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the England's financial district will become less relevant, and China will not be an industrialized unified country a decade from now. The only reason we even think about China as an economic power is because America put everyone on the same side, which made China united, at peace, which gave it access to global resources and global markets.
So we should talk about China now? What should we talk about now? This?
Yes, that's all.
Okay, and so, notes. There are a few qualities that made the U.S. Able to be the global superpower, having a global order on our side. England sort of had its own order when it had the British Empire, and it did more of like you have the carrot or the stick. England did more of the stick. They had their navy, and they had more technology than most of the places that they had in the British Empire. But meanwhile, we did more of a carrot to get people on our side and have our own global order. Part of it was ensuring the physical security, like for everyone on our side, like we've been mentioning. We ensured maritime security for all, and we ensured market access. We were also able to have this global system because we floated a global currency. We were able to have a global currency because there's just such a massive volume. With such a massive volume of our currency, little transactions on from day to day will not affect the value of the currency all that much. Another thing is that external trade was small compared to the domestic economy. like I showed on the map before, we are one of the least exposed. We are one of the least exposed to the rest of the world countries by trade, and so the external trade will not affect us much compared to other places like Europe. In Europe, trade will cause great fluctuations in their currency compared to us. We don't intervene that much with our currency compared to some serial currency manipulators like China. China could never have a global currency because of how much they manipulate it. Another reason that China could not have a global currency is because they don't allow the currency to flow freely in and out. We don't care if the currency flows freely in and out, but China would. Recently, China allowed some more investment, and every time that China allows investment, it causes problems like the money flowing out, and they don't like that.
Right. So one of the reasons that just America's currency is so desired all around the world is because it's not regulated so much, and it's not manipulated, and it's able to flow between countries so easily. So that a lot of countries around the world invest in American dollars. When Europe is in a crisis or other countries want to invest in something so that their money doesn't lose, so that they don't lose their the value of the work that they
flight to the dollar now.
Yeah, they have a flight to the dollar.
It happens. This flight to the dollar happened several times in the 90s, which was a big driving factor for the great economy that we had in the 90s. Places all around the world, from Europe to China, were fleeing from their own currency to the dollar.
This actually explains why America is able to have so much debt, because so many countries invest in our debt. So when we have debt, it's not just printing money. The debt is bought by other countries. So it's not like the money becomes worth so much less. As other countries demand to buy more dollars from us, our money actually doesn't get inflated as much as you might think it is when more money is printed.
Like particularly these stimulus for COVID, we've got billions, even trillions of stimulus, all kinds of forms, and a significant percentage, I think it was like a third of it, is actually fully backed by investment from other countries. We have people complain about the printing press just go. There's memes. Printing press go. Bleh. Well, it's not as simple as that, because we're not just printing money. A good portion of the money we're printing is actually fully backed by investment, and it's not just simple inflation. Do we have any other ideas that we're talking?
Well, okay, so the main ideas are America is prosperous most of all because we have great geography. We have natural borders around the...
We've got moats on both sides, the Atlantic and the Pacific, very big moats.
Right. And to the south, we have a desert that's hard to cross, so it's hard for people south of us to get into America.
It's not even like we're on bad conditions with Mexico or Canada anyway.
Right. So since America is not hard to defend, that allowed America to defend other countries. And
we could focus on our own economy in the first place because we didn't have to worry so much about defense.
Right. And the next main point we made was about the demography, how a lot of countries are getting older, but since
can't have consumption-driven growth, good.
Right. Yeah. But since America had the baby boom and we have a lot of immigrants coming to America,
we have the millennials to replenish the consumption-driven growth.
Right. So America is one of the best out of. I think it is the best of all developed nations with our demography.
There's France and New Zealand.
Yeah, right. So, those are the only other ones.
France and New Zealand are also they're the other developed countries that have manageable demographies. Like all other developed countries don't really have that good of a demography anymore.
Right. And then about the world, the system that America made with the Bretton Woods system to protect trade. Without that, a lot of the countries around the world could fall into starvation or some kind of wars or struggle for resources. And so there could be a lot of struggles throughout the world coming in other parts of the world, but America won't be involved. We won't care as much as we did in the past. And there's probably going to be a lot of conflicts coming in about 10 years.
Sort of like a cycle, because America is going back to like we were before the world wars in terms to some degree in terms of our isolation. Like Trump even said recently, we're going to get all troops out of Afghanistan by Christmas. We're at another thing is that we're at the lowest level of deployment since, what was it, the 20s?
Right. Trump, even more than other previous presidents, has been trying. Trump has been trying to bring home as many troops as possible. He brought back the troops.
Lowest level since when?
I don't know. It's a very low level of deployment of our troops.
I believe it was something like lowest troop deployment level since 1929.
Right. So a lot of troops are coming home, and we don't have as many deployed to other countries. Protecting other countries because we're not as concerned as we used to be about protecting other countries.
We don't care about the order, the post World War II order anymore.
We don't need as much oil as we used to because we have our own. We have our own, and we have new ways of drilling for it. And anything else to just review?
No, I think that was everything. All the points that you put down.
But like, it's really amazing to just think how America is prosperous, why America would help other countries, and why America would just be pulling away from other countries and becoming more isolationist, and how that's going to affect the rest of the world in the future years to come. Okay. So there's 3 books Peter Zion wrote, which the first one was Accidental Superpower, which explained how the world got to be this way. The Absent Superpower, which explains the conflicts that will happen without the US involvement. And Disunited Nations, his third book, explains what the countries will be like without America.
Okay, is that good yet?
That's about an hour, yeah. So
okay, good.
We're at 6, it just hit 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
All right.
So, gonna start taking questions soon.
Yeah, all right. So, first of all, yeah, great talk. I really enjoyed it. You guys covered so many important points from demographics to geography to our trade agreements with other countries. So, I know it's very hard to cover like the complete gamut of American geopolitics in 1 hour, but I think you both did a great job. So good, great, wonderful, and I think we can start the Q&A now. So if you guys have any questions in chat, please type them into the chat, and I'll read them out to you guys. Okay, so I personally have one question for you. Well, I have a few, but the first question I do have for you is, you talked about Bretton Woods a lot, the Bretton Woods Agreement. So could you go a little further and define what is the Bretton Woods system, and why should we care?
Right. So when World War II was ending, we were all the countries came to a table.
Allies.
Right. All the allies that were on our side came to a table to come to an agreement. We wanted to create a system. America wanted to create a system so that there wouldn't be wars like this in the future. And even at that time, I think Russia was starting to be a threat. I'm not sure when the Cold War officially started, but they already at that time saw Russia as a threat. So they wanted to create alliances with the countries that were on our side against Russia.
What was that? Bretton Woods was in Massachusetts or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Bretton Woods itself was a place, I believe, in Massachusetts.
It was the name of the city.
The name of the city.
And all the countries came to.
The Allies.
Yeah, the Allies. They all had representatives from each country come to the table to make an agreement, but Japan was at the table too, right?
Later.
Okay.
Okay, so the thing, something to note about the Bretton Woods Agreement is that then, after World War II ended, after we completely annihilated Japan, they suddenly got everything they could have ever wanted and more, because of all we were giving them in trade deals and what we were doing for them and ensuring the sea lanes were open.
Right.
We opened our markets, we opened the sea lanes, and so they were actually better off than they could have ever gotten on them by themselves, because they were strategically important to us. So over there on the eastern edge of the Soviet Union.
Right. Okay. So after we made the agreement for the Bretton Woods Agreement with our allies, America allowed other countries one at a time to come into the agreement, even some that we were fighting against in World War II. So eventually Japan joined, and they were really surprised that they were able to get for free what they were fighting so hard for.
And more.
And more. So yeah, Japan was fighting in World War II. A big part of that was.
Do you want to read this?
Give me a second to finish. Japan wanted to get access to resources, especially oil, and when
we joined the war against Japan because we told them that we would not let them have access to oil. Japan was desperately trying to make peace with us. Just that part of their peace deal with us before they bombed Pearl Harbor was that they needed that we would let them get vast shipments of oil so that they could stay industrialized. And so we didn't agree to that. We didn't like that they wanted to keep getting shipments of oil, and so they bombed Pearl Harbor. They tried to kick us out of the Philippines and out of Asia.
And that's another interesting thing Peter Zion answered for me, because I didn't know why Japan bombed us in Pearl Harbor. It was because we were restricting their access to oil, and they desperately needed that oil to stay in an industrialized country.
Is that good yet?
Do you want to say something here?
Oh yeah, let's talk. We just read that. It was. Hey, what's he doing? What's it? Yeah. Okay. And so, wait, that's not it. Yeah. So, what is it doing? So, Bretton Woods, there were 730 delegates representing 44 countries that met in Bretton Woods in July of 1944, and that's where all of that started. Okay.
All right.
Anything else about that?
No, I think that was a thorough answer. Sydney from YouTube chat asks, the rhetoric used to be that the U.S. had the responsibility to quote-unquote spread democracy. Do you think the U.S. should still have a responsibility to help other countries? And will they actually want to help?
See, that's another thing. That was good rhetoric, because it's too complicated to explain this whole Bretton Woods system. So when we went over to the Korea and Vietnam, that was part of the assurance that if you were threatened by the communists, if you were threatened by the Soviets, we would enforce it we would enforce the agreement with the full power of the American military might. It's a bit of a moot point to ask whether we should or not do that in the future, because, well, it's just not beneficial to us anymore. We did that in Vietnam and Korea to prove to the rest of the world that we would enforce our side of the bargain. We don't have that bargain of Bretton Woods anymore that anyone would care for. So we don't really have a horse in that game.
Right. So that's another really interesting thing that Peter Zion answered for me. That, like, why did we go to a Vietnam War? The war was really just to prove to all the countries involved in the Bretton Woods system that
we would uphold our bargain.
We would uphold our side of the bargain and fight for them. And about spreading democracy, I remember learning in history that when we tried to bring our American system of democracy to the Philippines and help them to industrialize, they didn't really appreciate everything we did there, and they really liked their old way of doing things. So I don't know if every country would really like the American system.
Another interesting part about geopolitics is that then you look at China, and it's very authoritarian because it always needed a strong government from the top. It needed a strong government from the top just to control the river system. The rivers are very, very unpredictable, and they need to be controlled. For all of this summer, there's been all kinds of news reports about the Yangtze River and the Three Gorges Dam, how they're failing at controlling the river, even with how authoritarian and how much power the government has. They're still not quite doing it to control the very nature they live in. They need a strong government there to control their nature. So geopolitics will even affect the sort of government you have. And so it's not exactly a thing that you can do to just turn all the countries in the world into democracies. It's not a thing about the people. It's a thing about their geography, geopolitics.
Right. So even if the people of a country want to have democracy or a system more like America's,
it might not fit them very well.
It's not necessarily going to work for them because Peter Zion really explained how a lot of things about a country are determined by their geography. And so some systems of government won't work in some places.
Okay. Good.
All right. So I have some more questions for you because you covered a lot of topics I'm personally interested in. You talk about how Germany and other countries, because they've been industrialized for so long, their demography is not doing too hot. You mentioned Japan. You mentioned those guys are using robots to solve their demography issues. Number one, do you think that's a good idea? Number two, can you recommend some solutions for those demographic issues?
Okay, it's definitely a good idea to use robots because, like I said, anytime the average age of a population in a country goes up too quickly, that can cause a lot of problems, such as the social security system being overburdened and all the families. You can't have one person taking care of two parents and four grandparents and expect that to be something that works easily for everyone. When you have robots able to help people in the home or in nursing homes or whatever, the people of the country can more easily deal with all the problems of a changing demographics so that it doesn't overload the system too quickly. And maybe those robots are just what they needed. And Japan has enough money that they're able to pay for that, which makes them lucky that they can do that, but other countries don't have the money to pay for those kind of things. So that puts Japan actually in a better position than other countries are.
And another thing about if we can actually reverse this aging, it's kind of just part of industrializing that the population growth would go down, the demography would get older, and over in Japan especially, they kept increasing their population to the point that people were cramped on like postage stamp sized apartment or something.
That's what he said.
Yeah, and so but it's like tiny cramped living quarters that they have in Japan because they have a good amount of area, but then there's lots of mountains and forests, and there's not very much that people can actually live in. And then let's go back to Germany again.
Wait. So
the last time that Germany was able to actually grow its population was during World War II, when they expanded the area that they had. When Germany expanded, there was more space for the urban people, for the city people to go in. When Germany could go expanding to places that were previously non-German, There was farmlands and other places where they actually had room to have bigger families. So a big part of this is that these countries have been industrialized for so long, they've just been stuck in small areas. And when you're not on a farm, children are a luxury. And if they're just a luxury, you need to think about whether you can pay for them or not. When you're on a farm, children are free labor, and you want to have as many of them as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And so as countries get industrialized, they get off of farms. It's sort of a natural occurrence for them to become aging populations, as we've been explaining.
Right. And so as populations become more industrialized, there's more people inside who live in cities. And when they're in cities, they're closer together. When people are closer together, there's not as much room for children. So people don't have as many children. So then there's not as many people born to replace them.
And another trend that this coincides with is sexual revolution, with all this stuff about abortion and contraception, but that gets into other stuff. So let's not get into that.
But but that's another one of the reasons why people are having less children. So a lot of things reasons coming together, which cause people to have less children at the same time, and which causes the countries to become less productive.
Makes them export driven.
Right. Well, because there's an older population, they need to export because there's not enough younger people to consume.
Right.
Okay. All right. Remember to ask questions in the chat, and I'll get to those if there are any. But in the meantime, I have another question for you.
Good.
You both say that and Peter Zion says that the United States will become more and more isolationist in the future. Is this a good thing or a bad thing in your opinion?
It's more. Peter Zion says it's more of the natural state that things have been for thousands of years.
He doesn't like it though. Peter Zion doesn't like it. He expected us to be at the forefront of a coalition of governments going to a single goal, and then when he saw reality, he didn't like it.
Peter Zion wanted globalism to continue. So in a way, this is like the end of globalism. More countries will be worrying about themselves. And in each region of the world, there's going to be minor superpowers, whereas I think it was Turkey would be one of
Turkey is a rising power, he says. France, particularly because of its demography, because of its good geography, it can be a good superpower. Like France never fully committed to the European Union. It made the European Union so that it could control the rest of Europe, and in particular Germany. But France never fully committed itself to that, and so France will be fine as the order collapses. Another one is Japan. Japan, through automation and other means, it's mitigated its demographic problems, but it still has one of the best navies in the world. And so it can enforce its power all the way up to the Middle East. Japan has made sure to have good relations with all of the powers in the Middle East. And in particular, they have also made sure they have good relations with India, because those are places that they will get the oil from, and the shipments need to go through Indian waters to get to Japan. So they need to have good relations with India to make sure that the shipments get safely to Japan. So do we particularly think it's a good thing or a bad thing, this isolationism? What do you say?
It's going to be very bad for a lot of countries, but it's going to be very good for other countries. It depends who you are and where you are.
As we are American and have lived here all of our lives, we would consider it a good thing. But if we were European, it would be a very bad thing.
If you're in America and you don't like America getting involved in foreign wars, it's good because we won't be as involved in foreign wars. And we won't have trade deficits with other countries like China. because we're going to start producing more of our own things in America with American factories and American farms. We're going to be less involved in the rest of the world's problems, and there's probably going to be a lot less integration from the rest of the world. Okay, so you said about France. In the European Union, Germany mostly was the leader of the European Union.
No, it wasn't.
Well, they had the most economic power.
Yes, but
Okay.
France controlled them.
Okay. Well, why don't you explain that?
Well, France created the European Union. Like I said before, France created the European Union as a means to control the rest of Europe, including Germany. And that was before the Cold War ended. And I think, yes. And then even after the Cold War ended and they reunified, they were still just practically controlling things. Like things would be between France and Germany would just look to France. Do we say yes to this? And France would tell them whether they should say yes or no, until I think it was like in the late 2000s, Germany decided to say no to stuff that France wanted them to do. And since then, it's been a struggle between France and Germany, and France never really committed. But Germany is fully integrated into the European Union system. And so if the European Union system collapses, so does Germany.
Right. So he said the European Union could actually collapse soon, within the next 10 years or so. And then France could end up with the power that it had over the European Union and the rest of Europe that it did for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have one last question, and it's going to be a quick one. Why should students care about geopolitics?
It helps you to understand what's going on in the world and why things are the way they are, instead of just wondering and having no idea what it is. You actually understand what's going on, and you have an idea of what's coming. A lot of what Peter Zion explains is the future, and he explains with graphs, this is the way things are, these are the trends that happened in the past, and this is why this is coming in the future. This way you can be prepared, and it helps you to understand what you should invest in, because a lot of what he says could be used for investment advice about what countries are going to prosper, what industries are going to prosper in the future, just by giving you an idea of what's going on and what's going to happen.
Well, just because geopolitics, as its name implies, shows that things are a lot more connected than the divided subjects that we learn in school. We would learn something like geography in school, and we don't hear how it affects politics as much. We'll have a political science course, and it doesn't really cover geography. But things in the world are not so divided. And so it's important to understand geopolitics just to see how much the world outside of the classroom really is connected, to see how one thing affects the other, and see how the world works from there.
Great. And as a corollary to that question, Sydney asks from YouTube chat, how did you guys get interested in geopolitics, and how did you come across this book?
I was looking for stuff to listen to while I was doing my job at Tiffany and Company, because I was doing something that I was working with my hands, and I would listen to stuff while I was working. And so I found some of his talks online, and I was very fascinated. Like we've been saying, he just answered so many, geopolitics were answering so many questions. And so I continued researching and reading and learning about geopolitics from there. And then I pulled my brother into it.
Right, so we were both reading through the books and listening to Peter Zion's talks. But we've always been interested in politics, and we watched the news for years with our dad, and we always talked about things like that together to get, what's happening in
how the world works,
current events, what's going on in politics, and just talking about history sometimes. And I remember when I was in 7th grade, I used to watch the History Channel a lot. So I was always really interested in what's going on and how things work.
Yeah, I agree with you guys, especially since the news nowadays is so polarizing, and a lot of the times you don't get the full story. But if you understand history, if you understand geopolitics and how the countries really interact with each other, it kind of gives you like an underlying understanding instead of like a kind of like a veneer of what a lot of the mainstream news gives you. So
It's good to listen to more than just the mainstream news. There's a lot of people on YouTube that give plenty of alternate ideas, alternate hypotheses, alternate sources of news than what most people hear on the mainstream news. And it's always a good idea to hear multiple sources of the news and what's going on.
We are past the media monopolies, really. There is no real reason for the media giants to have as much power as they do now. Anyone can just look online and find out what the giants don't want you to hear. The giants used to be able to control everything, and people wouldn't even know the difference. Now there's plenty of other sources, like we've been saying.
yeah, and that's great because people now they can make their own decisions and think for themselves a lot better now. There's so much information out there. So, all right. So, I'd like to thank you both again for coming to us and talking to us. It was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. It was very interesting. Is there anything you'd like to promote? How can people reach you?
Oh yeah,
Your channel.
yeah. I started a YouTube channel, and I was actually read the Peter Zion's book
And his newsletters.
and his website newsletters on my YouTube channel. So if you want to listen to me read it, a lot of people who search for Peter Zion on YouTube say that they enjoy listening to me read on my YouTube channel. So I just go through things that he wrote and read whatever he has. Daniel's been reading the new book.
You can provide a link for it.
Yeah, we could put a link for it in
Yeah, I'll put it in the description.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the names of his books were then.
Yeah, they're right. The names of Peter Zion's books were Accidental Superpower, the
Absent Superpower.
The Absent Superpower,
and the newest one, Disunited Nations.
Yeah, the third book is Disunited Nations.
He said, and then he said, now I need to write a fourth book, all because of the coronavirus.
Oh, we never talked about that. Right. So, Peter Zion said a lot of the things he wrote about in the third book, he expected to happen over about 10 years. And the coronavirus made it happen like hyperdrive so much faster than he ever expected. And now a lot of things are changed, and he has a lot more to write about, which gave him ideas for a fourth book.
So that's something to look forward to.
Right. So that the whole idea of countries becoming more isolated, think about what happened now with coronavirus. People are not able to travel.
We can't even go on vacation to another country like we wanted to.
We were
planning on going on vacation all the way back in the spring.
We were planning on going to another country on vacation, but we couldn't because the travel is restricted. There's no planes going there. So
isolationism right there.
Right. A lot of the isolationism that Peter Zion said was coming happened faster, and it's already happening now.
And then there were the instances where China would try to play games with its mask production or other pharmaceuticals or something, and that just made everyone realize, why are we getting this stuff from China? Why aren't we making the masks ourselves? Why aren't we making the drugs ourselves? And so there's going to be a demand for all of that stuff to be made in-house over here at home in America. We will not want to get stuff from China anymore.
So that just gives even more reasons for people to start making more things inside their own homelands.
Even in Europe, there was shipments of stuff like masks going between countries. Just like I think it was between France and England, and then France said, no, we need that for ourselves. It's not going to England. We need it for ourselves. And so again, that just goes back to the isolationism. Countries will just see themselves and say, wait, why can we? We're going to do what's good for us, not what's for you.
Right. So France didn't allow the export of masks, so they're just stopping export and the import into other countries.
So each country needs to make their own masks.
Mm.
Amazing how it's just accelerated the process of isolationism even faster.
So there's the books and our YouTube page. Okay.
All right, so I'll be sure to link your YouTube channel in our description so everybody can get access to that. But yeah, thank you again and again and again. There's so much stuff covered, and we're happy to have you guys back anytime. You obviously very knowledgeable about a lot of stuff, so we could have other conversations as you like. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, all right, so thanks everybody for watching. Remember to drop a like, share, subscribe to this video, join our Discord, join our Instagram. All the links are there.